What does it mean to believe something, and can we choose our own values? Like if you read existential psychology, which is bred out of it kind of the standard self-help space, when you go read self-help books or the self-help advice on YouTube, it comes from this existential place of you can choose your own values, you can choose what you desire and what you worth, and you can construct that into this image in the future, and you can deconstruct that as actions in the now to get to that future. And it's like you create your own, you create the things you value, you create your own future, you create your own goals and desires. And that seems to be the most common way of thinking. It's like you're the creator of your own destiny. You must create your own values. You must discipline yourself, set a goal, plan out a goal and a future, and work towards that. And that sounds good. It sounds empowering. It sounds like it would enrich life. But I think that image in the future that you impose on yourself becomes a slave. You become a slave to that image. And instead of actually listening to the fine-tuning process of human consciousness, you discipline yourself in a way which doesn't actually serve the right path. It serves your own ideas of what the right path is. And the ego's ideals, the ideal of the mind, is not the divine path that we should be on. And this is the place that I've come to appreciate. This is the place that I've come to maybe sit from now, is that we can act in accordance with principles. We can act in accordance with inherent built values and a hierarchical, structured way of looking at how to act in the world, but we can't predict the future. We can't impose concretized ideas of who we're going to be, where we're going to be, and how our life is going to plan out, because our images and our desires and our wants, when we impose them onto the future, we're imposing what we think is right, actually, instead of what is meant to be right. And I think it's quite self-centered to think that we can create our own meaning. And I think this is evident in the way that when you find things, when you get curious in something, or you fall in love with someone, or you find something passionate, you're not choosing to find that curious. You're not choosing to fall in love with that person. You're not choosing to find passion in that. They encompass you. They like possess you. Them states of emotion, them states of being, they take over you instead of you imposing them onto reality. And so meaning, for example, when you find something meaningful, it's not like you go, oh, I'm going to find this meaningful, and then evidently it becomes meaningful. It's like, wow, this task that I'm doing is so meaningful. This pursuit that I'm on is so meaningful. This relationship that I'm in is so meaningful. It's like reality gives you meaning instead of you giving reality meaning. And if this was the case, if we could just impose meaning onto the world, if we could just impose our own ideas of what we should do, there'd be no way of differentiating between if the person who sits at home in his room all day doom scrolling and says that's meaningful, there's no way of saying that's more meaningful than the person who's out there doing good in the world and saving people's lives and being charitable. Like, someone could decide in their mind that they're going to count every blade of grass in their garden for the rest of their life, every day, and say that's meaningful for them. But are they doing more meaningful work than the person that's out in the world feeding children in Africa? It's like, no, we don't get to impose our own meaning into the world. Meaning is kind of put onto us. And I always read this in Man's Search for Meaning. It's like, you must adapt to what life demands of you. And by that adaptation, by acting with accordance of what is happening in life, you find meaning within that. Life imposes meaning on you. You do not impose meaning on life. And I think that comes down to the structure of how we see the world. That comes down to the structure of how we act, the way, this philosophical axiom that we work from. If we believe that we are the creators of our own values and we're the creators of our own meaning, then we're left to our own self-deception. We're left to the trickery of the mind, instead of having some organizing principles that are there for us to act from, regardless whether we think they're right or not. There seems to be embedded values and a structural process of viewing the world that is more aligned with God, is more aligned with the truth, the essence, whatever you want to call it, than our own ideas and the ego's ideas. Because the ego's ideas and this image that you project out into the future, whether that be, in 10 years' time, I want to be a successful businessman, I want to have a six-pack, I want to have all of this, all these cars and whatever it is that you want in your life, when you construct that reality and that version of you and then you impose it out into the future, that's coming from all these different places of, oh, I don't like who I am now, so if I had more money and if I had this, I'd be a lot cooler and I'd get social validation. And it comes from the structure of your personality, which has been influenced by your experiences and the culture and society and the psychodynamics of the family, and all these things influence where you think you should go, because your personality structure, your ego identity, is formed by your experiences and by the culture that you're brought up in. And so then your images of where you're going, you want to be, are cultivated for you. It's not you making the choice. They're cultivated by your past experiences, by your life experience. And whilst you feel like you're making a choice, your choice is being influenced by the way that you've been brought up, the experiences that you've had. So you're not actually making the choice. It's just being imposed by your personality. But if you follow the principles of these moral guidelines that seem to be embedded into the human existence, then your life becomes God's will. It becomes more natural. It becomes the will of the personality, not the personality, the will of potential, like your true potential. And I don't want to use the word God because I think it gets people backs up. And I've never been a religious person, essentially, and I've only really now come to the conclusion of what my faith is, or I've started to come to a conclusion. And so I really try to refrain from using the word God. But when we have God as the organizing principle of our life, the organizing value, all the ideas and the moral guidelines that God endeavors down upon us, if we follow them and we use God as the highest principle, the highest organization for us to organize our mind and work towards, then our life naturally plays out in a way that is less resistant. Instead of aiming towards an image, instead of aiming towards a picture or this vision of where I want to be and who I want to be, if we aim at God, if we aim at the highest principle of whether that be sacrifice, whether that be faith, whether that be compassion, these principles and these values, if we aim at them and with the right intention of not wanting to get something out of them, but just aiming at them principles, then we're going to act in accordance with psychologically successful being. It's going to make us feel more at ease, more calm. We're going to feel more confident. Life's going to go better. This is really hard to articulate, guys. I've not come to the full understanding of my articulation yet, and I'm working towards it as I go. But I found that in my own life that especially when I first started self-improvement and self-development, I had this idea of who I wanted to be. And it was because I hated who I was at the time. I hated my life. I had extreme social anxiety. I wasn't confident in who I was. I didn't like my job. I didn't think I was very smart. And I created this image, this ideal, this person to strive towards. And he was rich and had this famous podcast. And like I had this whole image of who I'd be. I'd have a six-pack and stuff. And I used that as the thing that I would strive towards. It was the goal I was trying to reach. It was the organizing principle within my mind. So then I used the values of discipline. I used the values of courage to aim towards that principle, towards that value of that image of me in the future. But as I got more on my self-development, as I encountered life more and I turned up into my own life more and started experiencing new things, I started realizing that image was coming from a place of scarcity. It was coming from a place of me wanting to be impressive and me wanting to have social validation and be approved of. And I was still using the values of discipline. I was still using the values of courage, but it was to run away from who I was instead of doing it for the sake of that value, of that, doing it for the sake of having self-sacrifice or having discipline or having compassion. I was doing it for an end, and the end, it was becoming a means to the end instead of the means itself, if that makes sense. And the end was this goal that I pictured in my mind so I could ultimately feel satisfied with myself. And it just wasn't working. I found it was creating resistance in my being. It was causing me depression. It was causing me anxiety because I was constantly measuring up to, am I where I want to be yet? And why am I not feeling more confident? And why am I? And it's just question. But in times of my life where I feel the most still and calm are when I act in accordance with these moral guidelines that have been given to us through religious texts. Like, I'm going to bring religion into it because recently I've been reading the Bible and the story of Jesus. And when I think of what Jesus encompasses and what I think of what Jesus values and how he acts as a person, and when I live in accordance with how Jesus would act, and I put faith in in his way of being and put faith in God, my life flows a lot nicer. It flows a lot smoother, and I feel less anxiety. I feel less dread. I feel less confusion. And how we value things is really important. Like, why are values so important? And because what we value structures our perception, and what we perceive is how we see reality. So just think, like, your attention is this finite thing, and how does your attention concentrate on one thing? Like, if you look around the room that you're in, I'm looking now, there's curtains, there's a coat, there's a book over there's my laptop, there's this microphone, but I'm focusing to put my attention on the words I'm speaking and speaking to you, the listener. And so why is my attention organized itself in a way that I'm going to focus on you? And it's because there's a hierarchy. There's that my mind and the attention behind it is it's got a hierarchy of things it should put its attention on, and that hierarchy has worked out that what is of importance right now is me focusing on you, of me talking, and not focusing on the pattern of the pattern of the curtain. So there's a value hierarchy. We hierarchically put things with it in our mind, and how are them things that we value, how are they set up into that hierarchy? And it's through what we find important and where we aim. And this is why aim is so important, because if you aim at the ultimate value, which is, in my opinion, faith in God. But if you put it in courage, if you put it in discipline, whatever your ultimate value is, whatever you worship, your value hierarchy will get ordered from that ultimate value. So we all have an ultimate value, and this is where the idea of worship comes in. Like, everyone worships something. Some people might have that ultimate value as money. They might have it as social status. They might have it as fame, celebrity, whatever it is. They have an ultimate value. And when I believe that when that ultimate value is not God, it's not a faith in God, you worship a false God, and through that you fall victims to the manipulative tendencies of the mind. And so the reason I think of faith in God is so important is because the idea of God, the embodiment of Christ, however you want to see it, it orders and structures the rest of your mind, and then you act in accordance with that. It takes away the questioning of how to act, and you still have philosophical conundrums, you still have dilemmas in your life, but this organizing principle is always there for you to work from. And when you worship a false god, you fall into the victims and the traps of life and the tendency of human nature. And I think when I set this goal in the future of how I want to look and who I want to be, that is worshipping a false ideal, because the values behind that are, I want to be loved, I want to be accepted, I want for people to find me impressive, and blah blah blah. There's these list of things, these list of values that are tied underneath that ultimate value of this future that I want. And because my aim's not right, I'm not aiming at the right thing. And so your aim, where you aim and where you put your attention on is vital, because it structures the way you see the world, and your aim is your ultimate value. What is your ultimate value? And maybe you don't have to have a belief in God for this. Atheists would say that there can be objective ultimate values, but I think at that point they're just intuiting the ultimate values that are already there, so they're kind of acting in accordance with God, although their mind won't admit it. So I don't know if there is really a true thing as an atheist, because I think regardless of them saying they're an atheist, I think they act in accordance with God. I think they act in accordance as a Christian or as whatever religion they subscribe to. And when I think of Christ, for example, when I think of who Christ embodies, and he is the incarnate person of God, if we believe, like hypothetically, if you just sit with me now and believe that Christ actually exists, and symbolically what he represents, but we believe he was the Son of God that came down to earth and sacrificed himself for the sins of all of us, and he wants us to put our ultimate faith in it. If we put ultimate faith in Christ, ultimate faith in God, then that structures the way we see the world, and that helps us act in accordance with right action, and we're aiming towards a right thing. We're not aiming towards a material image. We're not aiming towards a future that we're wanting to impose. We're aiming at God. We're aiming at the core ultimate value. And you don't have to call this God. You don't have to call this Christ. I don't know, however you want to call it. But aim at the right ultimate value, and that will structure the way you see the world, and structure your perception, and structure your reality. And you will act in accordance with that. And your life will be better. Your life will be smoother, and things will go well. And I truly, truly believe that. And a belief can be false, and I might have a faulty belief here. I'm not... There's a really interesting quote. It's like, have firm beliefs held loosely. And I hold tight onto this belief. I believe it is the truth. I believe if you have that ultimate principle, that ultimate organizing value, which for me is God, and you aim at that, the rest of your life will fall in place, and you will act in accordance with that, and your actions will become easier. You will not question yourself as much. Life will not be as ambivalent. You will not be lost in the, oh, do I do this or do I do that? What do I do here? What do I do now? You just think of the organizing principle, and that's your orientation. It's your philosophical axiom. And I think through that, life becomes easier. I think that's everything I've got to say today, guys. I can't really think of much else I want to talk about. It's very philosophically confusing, and I'm theologically, psychologically, I'm not the most articulate with it all. I think for a level of self-development, I've got, or like, do you know the standard self-development advice, standard self-development YouTubers? There's a lot more depth in what I say than them, but there's levels of nuance in the thinking of theology, psychology, spirituality, that I'm just not at the levels yet, and I'm reading to get to that wisdom. I want to understand on that deeper level, and the deeper you go, the more you find. The psychological process, the developmental process of becoming whole and becoming individuated is paradoxical. It's scary, but it's also exciting and fascinating. And once you go down the path, you can't turn back. And so I hope that I've related what I'm learning and the experiences I've had in an effective and articulated way today. And I hope at least gives you a little bit of insight into how I'm seeing the world, and hopefully that resonates and works with you. I get very apprehensive about mentioning Christ or God, because I know people's ideas around religion. I know people's ideas around Christianity, especially in from England, in kind of like an atheist culture and atheist society, nihilistic in terms of like we don't have this collective belief in God anymore. I think people get their backs up about the idea of God and the idea of Christianity, and I used to be one of them people. But as I develop more spiritually and I get more into theology and psychology, I realised that they were my own ideas, listen to the culture, and there is a lot more wisdom and truth in there than you think and that we can possibly know. And even if you don't want to blindly fall into dogma or fall into a belief, they're worth inquiring about, because there is wisdom in these ancient texts, and there's wisdom in the words of God, Christ, or whoever you want to discuss, or whatever religion you want to go into. But thank you very much for listening, people. I haven't done a video in a while, so again, apologies if I didn't articulate myself correctly. This is a confusing video to make, especially your first one back. But yeah, I'll see you all whenever I post a video.